So I have some questions I'd like to ask everyone first. How many people here have done direct-to-consumer genetic testing, like 23andMe or Family Tree DNA? And now another question, how many people have signed up for the PGP or some other project in which you're sharing your genetic data publicly? And a lot of people, too, have done that, and that's great. And I want to talk a little bit about why it's important, such projects are important. DNA, of course, is very popular. It's the code of life. It's responsible for a lot of about who we are, you know. And DNA has become extremely cheap to sequence. There's just been this phase shift. This chart kind of diagrams the course of recent history as I went through grad school, and now I'm a postdoc, of this huge phase change. Sequencing is cheap. A genome is now a couple $1,000, and it's going to get cheaper. And we are probably all going to get genomes because it's sort of diagnostic. It's going to last your lifetime, and it's definitely in the range of medical testing at this point. Sounds great. Let's study it. So take some people, sequence their genomes, science. So what about the people we research? Traditionally, and I gave a tool a hard time because this is something that we don't want to think about because it's a hard problem. It's traditionally, researchers promise privacy, and this is how research has been done traditionally in past decades. A researcher comes up to a patient, says, don't worry, it'll be kept private, then takes that data, goes to the person who's doing the analysis, says, check out this cool data, don't worry, it's anonymous. I removed the names. That's not necessarily going to work anymore. There's some properties of DNA that make it a little difficult to anonymize in a truly de-identified manner. Some properties of DNA. DNA predicts things, and that's what's so exciting about it. That's why we all want to find out what our genomes have. It's unique. It's uniquely ours, and so it's a fingerprint. More so than any actual fingerprint, this is actually a good predictor. Fingerprints aren't that good. And what's worse is it's very easy to digitize, which means it's easy to share. We can all upload this data, and we're not supposed to, but it becomes easy to accidentally share or just, you know, things leak. Digital files get shared. DNA is very digital. Re-identification is increasingly realistic. So I guess you guys all know how little data it really takes to make someone uniquely identified. You know, CODIS just uses 13 sites. There's over 3 million differences between any two individuals. We could imagine, this is kind of science fiction right now, but you could imagine trying to re-identify someone based on the genetic data's predicted effects. So, you know, if their genetic data predicts certain physical features about them. Twins have, you know, matching faces. Maybe someday we'll get really good at predicting faces from data. But most realistically, I think right now is we should think about the fact that there's a lot of family-related data. Tiny fragments in your data can match you to cousins just like 7 generations away. Anyone who's done 23andMe is going to know that there's just a ton of people out there that are sharing tiny fragments with you. And direct-to-consumer genetics is really building up a lot of data out there that these people have. And they're also making inroads into building family trees and building that information. So re-identification due to shared ancestry, I think, is already possible and is just becoming increasingly likely. Okay, so maybe we shouldn't share data. If we're going to do some sensitive research like the genetics of depression, maybe we should just keep that under wraps and not share it with anyone. But private data is bad for science. That's something that everyone here pretty much agrees with. We want to share the data. We want data to be as shareable as possible, public. So this sets up a tension between data sharing and privacy and promises of privacy. Obfuscation is very hard and maybe impossible. So I've put up reference to Homer et al. Here, which was a paper which generated a lot of changes. It caused dbGaP, this database of shared pooled genetic data, to turn into something that's protected. Because people thought, oh, I could just pool a lot of data and then nobody can really pick out one person. Well, it turns out you can because the data is very unique. And you can do tricks, like I mentioned earlier, about the RNA expression and maybe pick out genotypes that way. Controlled access databases like dbGaP, set up a tension between privacy and sharing. So you apply for forms and you like have to go through all this stuff, which means that maybe it's not really shared because it's really hard to get to. Then like if you make it easier to get to, then are you really keeping up with your privacy promises? There's inherently this tug of war between the two things. Right now, this is where most of the money and research is going, like basically all of it. All of it is going into dbGaP. And it can be very difficult to get data out of dbGaP. So often researchers will say, oh yes, I shared my data. But what they mean is they shared their data in a controlled access database, and it's not going to be possible for our tool students to just download it. The complete genomics genomes on their website is invaluable because it is public, and 1,000 Genomes Project and HapMap data is public, but sort of data that connects traits and phenotypes to genetic data, that's just not out there. So open consent is something that the Personal Genome Project developed to try to address this and address this tug of war by picking a winner, by picking data sharing and not privacy, and no promises of anonymity, privacy, or confidentiality are made. Now, you're not required to put your name on it, but the point is you have to demonstrate an understanding that you might get re-identified. It is, I'm quoting this paper here, an ethically honest but extreme approach to consent. I am hoping that it's becoming less extreme, but I like this quote because it says, because of the phrase ethically honest, which kind of questions the ethics of all of the other research, you know. So it's something that we need to think about when working with all this data. So the Personal Genome Project was created by George Church at Harvard Medical School and has since, you know, accrued a whole staff of people and enthusiasts. George is farsighted, and he saw that this tension was building between genetics and privacy, and public data is important. So if someone joins the Personal Genome Project, their donated samples, they're committing to their donated samples becoming public, their data, and also biological derivatives should they donate blood to create cell lines. Whatever you choose to share can be public. So it's kind of up to you, but you can share stuff like health records, genetic testing data. You can share your name. Identification is not required, but it's an acknowledged risk. Many other risks and also many unknowns. One of the favorite, so we have a entrance exam, and we try to go through hypothetical risks, and one favorite one of people is once your genetic data is out there, it's getting a lot easier to synthesize data. I mean, that's something else the Church Lab works on, is all this, is biotech, you know, and also synthetic DNA is something that they've done. And you could synthesize someone's DNA and plant it at a crime scene and frame them. Okay, so that's a fun favorite risk. You could withdraw and remove your data, but it might be too late. We focus on truly informed consent. It's not sign here at the bottom. We have a test. You have to demonstrate an understanding of risks. This is frustrating to some people, but we feel it's really important to show that you know what you're getting into. Autonomy is paramount. You have to take the exam yourself. You can't enroll a parent with dementia. But on the other, conversely, your family can't stop you from enrolling. They might really not want you to enroll because they share a lot of DNA with you. You get your data back too. It is your data made public, and many of our participants are researchers and citizen scientists. You'll get raw data if we generate it, and we try to do interpretation, but the data we're collecting with the Personal Genome Project is the very data needed to get good interpretations, so that's still something we work on. The fact that people have agreed to all of this stuff means that we've enabled the collection of a diverse set of things, because now all of these very personal types of data are, you know, can be connected together in a public profile, because now we have people who have said, that's okay, I understand that this might be attached to me, I'm okay with that. And we're actually collecting a lot of that data right now in the project. We've made a lot of progress. Our GET conference this year was in the Genome Environment Trait Conference was in April, and we had lots of participants come, and we got lots of blood and microbiome samples, and we're getting a lot of genomes and microbiome sequences as a result. We have a paper that came out in July that's open access. We actually got to use George's inaugural article for PNAS, and this is trying to, so I think we've successfully shown that science can be done with this type of data as well. We have 1,100 participants sharing medical and trait data, saliva samples collected from about over 1,000 participants, more than 300 users with donated genetic data like 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, lots of cell lines at Cornell, and lots of whole genomes coming in from complete genomics. So it's lots of progress that we've made in the last year, and it's a really exciting time, but we still need to keep that ball rolling. It's started to roll, but we need to keep pushing it, and so we need your help. You can help in a number of ways. If you're comfortable making your data public with that risk of re-identification, you can join. And there's other projects that also share data like this that I've listed here, like WeConsent, OpenSNP, Genomes Unzipped, where you can also consider donating your data. You can do it to like multiple places. It's not exclusive, but the culture of sharing is important. You can use our data. We have the get evidence as our interpretations, and that's what the paper was published about. And that's an open interpretation system where anyone can try to interpret genetic variants and share it under public domain, CC0. And we have CC0 data as well that you can try to use as a researcher. And you can also support us. Even if you're not a participant, you can follow us and talk about us as a new approach to research, and you can consider using open consent processes in your research. And the acknowledgement slides. This is a picture from our GET conference this last year. It was really, really exciting to finally make the connection with all of our participants and our staff here. And I think there's a large overlap in that Venn diagram. We have people who are both staff and participants. And those are the people that I really need to acknowledge. Any questions? Okay. Oh, here, Patrick.
Maybe a little bit out of left field, but I was wondering if PGP has any policies or thinking of policies around sequencing dead people.
So, it conflicts with our autonomy thing, right?
Right, exactly.
So like, since we've taken the approach that you have autonomy, you have the right to decide to risk, your privacy and stuff. Mm-hmm. We would love to take dead people, and also we would love to take people who can't make decisions for themselves, like with dementia, mm-hmm. mental retardation. I think that the project needs to grow, and we need to have enough data right now from people who have made the decision themselves to kind of show that it's safe. There's strength in numbers. The more of us mm-hmm. that join, right. And then we can consider approaching that.
So just to give you a little background on where I'm coming from here, my parents passed away several years ago. But I know there's still samples available both at the hospital and their personal physician. And I have the consent of my siblings. I would love to submit their DNA for sequencing.
Yeah.
And
so that sounds like an ideal situation because your siblings
right?
all agree, and so you should be.
Yeah. Of course, you have to navigate sort of the bureaucracy at the hospitals, or you have to talk to somebody who can get the samples and all of that. So
yeah.
It gets tricky.
No, we have a lot of interest in that. We'd love to go there. We have we would love to go there, yeah.
Hi, this is great. Just as actually an add-on to that last question, do you have any mechanisms so far, or are you developing one, where you could bequeath your information when you die? Because I can imagine there's a lot of people who, may want to contribute to this but are worried about the privacy implications, but, once you're dead, who cares?
That's very interesting. We hadn't thought of that. That's something that we can start discussing. I'm going to take that back to our small team, and we can talk about potentially making donations upon death. That's cool. Thank you.
What kind of traction have you had outside of sort of this open science movement within sort of standard academia? Obviously, George is a big name within academia, but is it influencing sort of standard academics? Are people accessing your data and publishing on it?
Well, I'm hoping now that we have this paper published and now that we have some data sets coming in to get more of that. It has been difficult because there's kind of the perception of the project is like a vanity project, when I think it's the opposite. It's people really giving of themselves. I think, I'm not sure if that answers your question. I think that we've made a lot of progress recently, and so I think we can see changes happening in terms of using the data. Oh, I actually have an answer to add to that. The critical assessment of genome interpretation is running right now, and they're going to be using PGP data because it's just ideally suited for that. And so we have like a dozen or so genomes that are going to be used, and so people can try to interpret the genome and see whether their assessment wins.
Seems like a lot of traction with rare disease. What's your traction with rare disease for the PGP?
Like, we have participants who coincidentally have rare disease. One of the things that we'd like to do is have sponsored sequencing for those people because they have a rare disease and they're willing to make their data public. And so I think that would be a great way to fund some more genome sequences to be done.
Ready for lunch? Thank you so much.